And yeah, let's start. So welcome. Today we're going to talk about data-driven businesses and what it takes to start one. So just as a round of introduction, my name is Rosa Vasilyeva, and I'm a data and digital inclusion specialist at the IFC, which is the International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank Group. I work in Washington, D.C., and I also have a PhD in digital economy. I will let my other colleagues introduce themselves. Over to Michelle. Michelle, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Hakome. I'm an operations officer at IFC, part of the Sustainable Infra Advisory team based in Washington, D.C., and I am a data and digital inclusion specialist. So looking forward to hearing a lot from you. I see that we have a relatively small group, so we're going to really dive into the challenges that you might have with your businesses. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Michelle. Over to Gabriela.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabriela Slava. I'm a sustainability consultant with the Sustainable Infrastructure Advisory team and looking forward to getting to know your insights in this session.
Great. Dunstan? Oh, Dunstan, sorry, you're on mute. Can you, yeah, thank you.
Sorry for that. Hello, everyone. My name is Dunstan Madeganya. I'm a data scientist at the World Bank Group. I'm happy to be here and discuss with you about how to use data for building a business.
Thank you so much, Dunstan. And last but definitely not least, Ashwin.
Hi, guys. Good evening. I'm calling from India right now, but I live in Accra, Ghana. I'm basically a venture capitalist, and I'm a really active supporter in early stage startups, and I'm really glad to be here alongside everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Ashwin. We are very excited about the session today, and like many pointed out, we will also be learning from you, so get ready. So for the agenda today, I will go over a brief introduction of open data and digital entrepreneurship. I will give you some examples of what we actually mean by that. Then we will dive into design thinking for business ideas, which will give you an overview and a couple of tools of how you can actually start identifying a problem for your business solution. Then supporting your business solution with data, which actually will go through how to use data for your business. And that will involve a practice in a breakout group. So get ready to meet some of your other fellow participants. And then final section will be the most, I can say, even important one, because it will actually go through some business planning for your digital solution. And from the business perspective, we'll teach you what are the first steps to take. And that will also be with practice in a breakout group. And then we'll go through some Q&A to answer any of the questions that you might still have for our experts. Now, the objectives for today, at the end of this session, hopefully you will understand what open data is and understand two very distinct ways how businesses can use open data. You can apply design thinking process to identify a problem to a potential business solution, understand how to find and also use data to support your business, also name some useful resources for open data, and understand the steps in setting up a data-driven business. So a lot to learn from this short 1.5 hour session. So let's dive right in. First, we know how important data is. You might have heard that data is the new oil. That term was coined by British mathematician Clive Humby back in 2006. So it's been almost 2 decades that we have really appreciated the value of data. What he meant by that is that, like oil in 18th century, data is an immensely untapped asset, basically raw material, that can be refined, processed, and turned into some really valuable outcomes. We're in digital economy era now, and data is even more valuable than ever. In fact, it's more valuable than oil now that we know that. Oil is a finite resource, whereas data, we keep getting more and more data every day. And it can be used, reused, and replicated, and it doesn't really lose its qualities from it. So the more people use it, it can become even more valuable. So when data is properly refined, it becomes basically your decision-making tool, right? So as a business, you can use that insightful information that comes from data and basically react to market forces. That is also a premise for open data. And by the way, I want to ask you guys in the chat if you have heard the term open data or maybe even used open data before. So please let us know what in your great Florence. So any others, please put in chat what open data means to you. And if you have used it, maybe you can give us some examples as well. So it's open data, basically data that can be freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone, including for commercial purposes. And that's very important because there's great commercial value in reusing just data that is already available online. So just to give you a better sense of what open data actually is, you can see the chart here. It's produced by the Open Data Institute. And in addition to the definition, you need to know a few important key things. Yes, it's data that you can access for free. It's available to everyone. It also needs to be machine readable, accessible, and processable, which means that if you create an app or some business solution, you can easily pick it up and use in a machine readable format. It also needs to be licensed. So you need to be very careful as a business. You should understand that the data that you find online needs to be licensed properly for reuse, which includes commercial purposes, which in our case is important since you want to build a business using this data. And also it needs to be non-personal data that doesn't include any national security data, risk data. And basically you cannot identify a specific person from that data. You can see an example here. Open data is on the very right end of the spectrum. It's not only publicly accessible data, but also anyone can access an open license. As an example, maybe the weather feed or bus timetable, something that is you can find online and doesn't have personal data in it. So very good. I cannot see other answers. Has anybody used open data before? I can tell you right now that everyone has used open data, but maybe if you can give us more examples, that would put it in a perspective. So in digital economy, data really is a fuel for digital economy. You start with data mining and extraction. So you gather data from different resources, then you refine, and it's a very important point because as just going back to oil comparison, if you don't refine it, it's basically useless, right? So you need to transfer your data and use the insights from the analytical products, perhaps, or even as raw material for your businesses. That we will discuss in the next slide. So as a business, you can have two very distinct ways how you can apply data to your business idea. One, as a source of information and analytics, basically. You do your research before you market research. You do all sorts of research before you start a business. So for that, you obviously need data. And that's the analytical part. But then as raw material, you can actually create data-driven products, which will use data to provide services, and perhaps you can use it in some applications like phone apps and stuff. You have a few examples here, like Climate Corp and Zillow definitely use a lot of open data, but I wanted to give you a better sense of how you can use it. And for that, I will use examples from our work as from Disclosure to Development program, where we conducted a few innovation challenges. It's a hackathon type events. I'm sure you have heard of that word. Maybe you've even participated. Again, please let us know in chat if you have been a participant in a hackathon before. So here you see an example of Sierra Leone Mining Innovation Challenge, where we delivered a hackathon and an open data competition. Isaac has not participated yet, but hopefully we will inspire you and you will participate at some point. And it basically was a 2-month digital and business skills training program where participants in addition to training sessions, also took some trips to the communities. And that's also important to validate your ideas and and perhaps even collect some more data from the communities. And they had a boot camp to practice their final business pitches. And as a result, one of the top idea was the Smart Cure. It's actually, you can go online and look for these guys. They have started their business idea out of that hackathon. It leveraged data from Sustainable Development Goals 6 data portal and some university data that they could find to understand the impact of their solution. So their device, their digital device, I should say, measures water quality, and it sends alerts to the community about safety of the water in the community. So they're now working, they worked on a prototype during the program, and they're now working to improve their solution and take it out to market. They explored open data to show illnesses that basically are caused by unsafe water drinking in the communities where we took them to. So that was one. Another one also came out of a challenge that we conducted in Ghana, and it's called Asa Nwuru. They used a lot of data on waste management, including companies' data on waste, as well as generated their own data. Sometimes you see that the market share is quite small, so you need to even produce your own data. So they created a platform, basically an SMS-based platform that allowed bringing together waste generators, collectors, and recyclers, and create a holistic approach to waste management. Their revenue model is basically based on subscriptions, commissions, gate fees, sales, and franchising. So quite a diversified revenue based. This startup is already operating in the market, and they have had some success getting traction with some of the investors. So we wish them all the success. Also, glad to know that it came out of the hackathon that we organized. Another one, also conceptualized from a hackathon. You see a lot of good ideas come out of these innovation events. It's called Budget. It's been around for quite some time, so you may have heard of them. They actually work on budgetary data from federal government in Nigeria, and they make it more machine readable and visual for those people who want to access it, but they are not necessarily data literate. So it visualizes federal government data, specifically budget data, and they have reached a very admirable goal of 2.5 million Nigerians for 2017 budget, and they saw over 25,000 citizens participate in the budget review process, which is incredible. And basically, they're encouraging public review of the budget caused a public servant salary cap. So there's some real outcomes of the work they did. They operate on grants and partnerships. And in 2017, they have raised quite a bit of money from Gates Foundation and OMIDR. So also quite an exciting initiative. You can look into that and maybe even participate. If I know that this webinar is being recorded, so maybe some participants from Nigeria will be joining or watching this later, so check it out definitely. So those are some examples of how data can be used for your digital startup, data-driven startup. And now let's dive into some of the tools you can use, some of the skills you can develop in order to start a business like this. So design thinking for business ideas. I would like to invite Michelle and Gabriela to please take us through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. Really, really interesting to hear everything and all the examples. So just in the chat, I'd like to know how many of you have heard of design thinking. Just give me a yes or a no while I explain what it is. So design thinking is a human-centered approach to problem solving, and it emphasizes really empathy, collaboration, and iteration. And what's What's unique about it is that it focused specifically on the generation and creation of ideas, but with a user-centric approach. So what this means is that you really kind of drill down on the problem and user need that you're trying to identify to design your entire business. So next slide, please. So this is, give me 1 second, let me minimize this, great. So this is more or less the design thinking approach to problem definition. So you see that there are 6 stages. You have empathy and user research. Here you talk about really the needs and aspirations of the target users, how you want to engage with your users, whether it be research, observations, maybe some focus groups, like how do you understand your target audience? Then you start by defining the problem. So what's your problem framing? Here, you start with some of the user insights that you've already identified to reframe the problem that you're thinking about solving. This really helps at creating the problem statement that you're going to use for the development of your business creation. And then you go into the ideation phase. And this ideation phase is kind of the fun part. This is where you start generating ideas and identifying potential business opportunities. And this is really where you go a step beyond the obvious solutions, right? Then you go on to prototyping and testing. And the last 3, the prototype, test, and reiteration, they're called the validation phase, the validation and development solution phase. So here in this phase, you start to validate the business idea that you have and running the assumptions and checking the assumptions that you potentially could have had in the design in the previous stage, which is ideate. So in the prototype and testing, a startup can, for example, start producing what we call the minimum viable products to test their assumptions. So you don't want to go on and launch a full-on business idea without testing your product. So you basically do the sufficient amount of the design of the idea in order to gather feedback from users. Through this process, then you start iterating. So what does that mean? Iteration means that you continuously test, you gather feedback, you adapt, you redefine the problem, and you address again. So this is a really important phase in order to really target the type of problem that you have. In the solution development phase, this is essentially where you start to co-create and you start to collaborate. So you start thinking about who are your key stakeholders, what type of interdisciplinary approaches are you using, what type of team members do you want to use? So for example, do I need a data scientist? Do I need someone who knows about management? Do I need a technical person who's specific on, we're going to talk about a water example in a few minutes, but maybe we need a water specialist. So you really start thinking about the collaboration that will help you ultimately take your idea to market. Again, the last thing is reiteration. And reiteration, we're going to emphasize on this point again and again and again, because you have to continuously validate and redefine the problem, redefine the problem's definition, and making sure that the solution you're developing is actually going to be, there's actually going to be an uptake in market. So ensuring that it's aligned with your user needs and the evolving market conditions. Very, very important. So these are the main principles and methods. In this specific training, we're going to teach you 2 tools. We're going to teach you empathy mapping, and we're going to teach you the 5 whys. Those are the basic and very basic tools to be able to start asking the questions of what problem is your business trying to solve? Like, what exactly are you going to put in market that's going to make someone else's life easier or better? So let's go on to the next slide, please. So this is empathy mapping. Have any of you heard of empathy mapping before? I'm going to see the chat. I see that Isaac has heard about design thinking. Nothing. This session is for you all, so we really encourage you to participate. And it gives me also a good idea of how to tailor the content that's going to be most useful for you. Okay, so I see that the majority of you have not done empathy mapping, so let's talk about it. So empathy mapping is a technique used in early stages of design thinking to to get a better understanding of the user's emotions, the thoughts, behaviors, and needs. So this might sound, a little bit out there, but what's really important is that all of the market needs and businesses that have been successful really touch at these four things: users' emotions, their thoughts, a changing behavior, and something that they're trying to acquire or need. So by putting ourselves in the shoes of other users, you can develop something that's more meaningful and, more importantly, more relevant for addressing their challenges. So again, there's 3 things that it helps us address. One is understanding users, so gaining insights from what they experience, their motivations, their pain points. The second one is foster empathy, so understanding what their issues is from a different perspective, right? What your biases might bring to the table could be detrimental to your own business approach. So it's important to think about the solution from their perspective. And then lastly, enhanced collaboration, like we mentioned before. It promotes cross-collaboration across team members, across different operational teams that you might have. So Gabriela is going to teach us how to fill this out for it to be beneficial. So on to the next slide, and Gabriela, please take us through the example.
Thanks, Michelle. So I would like everyone to participate in the chat with your ideas. You can see we have the screen divided in 4 parts. Let's try it with an example. Let's imagine that we are part of a community that lack access to clean water. So what would you say in the first quadrant in the left side? The idea of this is to capture the statements or actions related to the user. So what are they saying about their experience, their needs, their desires? I give you some examples here. So for example, I want to drink clean water. I would like to know what's the source of the problem. Lack of clean water is affecting my health. What else would you say if you're part of this community that doesn't have clean water? I'll give you some minutes to type some of your ideas in the chat before going to the next quadrant. Or maybe I capture everything that it is to say about lack of clean water.
We can also feel free to unmute and give us an idea of what you think would be a challenge in this lack of access to clean water. Like, what do you think?
How do I get clean water? Increase in water-related diseases. So you're linking it to the health issues. Great. Those are some good ideas of what people would say. So moving to the think quadrant, this one is for including your thoughts, beliefs, or assumptions that might be influencing the user's behavior or decisions. So the key question here is, what are the underlying thoughts or concerns? I give you some here. Maybe I can create a solution, or will this make me ill? Or for how long has this water quality been bad? What else would you include in the thinking quadrant? How do I pay for clean water? Will it be cheap? Accessibility and health, priority areas. What else is in your mind when you think about the lack of access to water as a problem? Why is the government not taking care of it? Yeah, like looking for people who are responsible for that. How can technology improve this? Maybe I can create a solution, or maybe I can look for some experts to help me with a solution. So while you keep typing in the chat, I'll move to the quadrant on doing. So this one focuses on actions or behaviors of the user. So the key question here is, what are they doing or not doing? And how do they interact with the product or service? So in doing, I have included maybe you can do some research, maybe you can ask friends, look for experts. If you are facing this problem as part of a community, what would you do? So please use the chat to include some actions that you think you could do, thinking that you're also trying to link this to a business idea. Ask neighbors. Yeah, see if there is an interest in the community around doing something. Find data. Consult the water company. Yeah, those are good actions we could include there. Lastly, we also want to include what are we feeling. So we want to explore the emotions, desires, fears, or aspirations that the user may be experiencing when facing this problem. How do they feel about the situation? I have included some feelings here, maybe concerned about the health issues related to not having clean water, maybe overwhelmed, maybe unsure about what are the tools available for accessing clean water, or maybe they can be motivated to do something. How would you feel when facing this challenge? Oh, I've seen some replies for the do. Ask CSOs who have same interest. That could be included there as well. Those are great ideas, and this is just a quick example that you could use for any problem that you want to dive more into. You just have to have the initial idea of the broad problem and use the empathy mapping to start narrowing it down. So I think I can over to you, Michelle, for the next part.
Thank you, Gabriela. So I want to go back because we're going to start thinking about this example. So remember the lack of access to clean water and all the great ideas that you have about, asking government agencies, asking CSOs, collecting data, trying to figure out who has more information, because Dr. Dunstan is going to eventually take us through a group exercise that will help you with this problem definition, okay? So let's keep that in the back of our minds, the lack of access to clean water, but I want to learn a little bit more about the business ideas that you are all thinking about incubating or that you might already have. So if you want to add something to the chat about a specific business idea that you want to maybe go through the empathy mapping with. So let's use this time for it to be useful to you. And we are happy to take on one of your ideas and go through this mapping. So let's see if someone is brave and wants to share their idea. We promise we won't steal it. A hair salon that makes women comfortable. Awesome. Are there more ideas? Okay, let's use this one. An airy goat protect to export milk. Oh, I'm gonna have to ask you to, a dairy, okay. That makes more sense. A dairy goat project, okay. I'm going to go with the dairy goat project, just because I know, Florence, we can talk about our salon maybe at another time, but let's see thank you, Florence. Let's go with the goat milk. So let's go back a slide. A coastal area community-based beach cleaning. Very cool. Okay, so maybe we can go through a few of the goat milk business, and then we can go through the coastal area community-based beach cleaning, okay? So let's go, Rosa, if you can take us back to the slide. So let's go first with the dairy goat project. So I see your username. I'm not sure what your name is, but please tell us Let's start thinking about the first quadrant, which is thinks. So for how long what problem are you trying to address? Give us the thoughts behind this. Okay, the business is called Dan Dairies. So let's try to fill out the quadrant number 1. Malnutrition is a major issue in my village. Okay, so what are the, so we have the underlying concern that there's a major issue in my village. So what do you think, what are some other underlying concerns? Lack of enough milk. Exactly. So now let's go into the do section. So what would you do or not do? So you're trying to solve the problem, which the underlying root cause would be the lack of enough milk. And that has of course, the consequence of malnutrition in your village. So what would we do? Would we need to understand, for example, the demand for how much milk you need? Do we need to understand the quality of the milk maybe that needs to be delivered to solve the malnutrition issue? Do we need to know what type of goat would produce the most milk? What do you think we should or should not do? Okay, let me help you a little bit more. So maybe it's also a matter of, and now I'm going to go back a little bit into the data portion of the conversation, but exactly the type of goat that will be a great place to start. So, you know, we need research, we need maybe to understand how much milk is being generated, but by what type of goat. You might need to bring in data from the agri sector. You might need to also incorporate alternative solutions such as cows. You might need to also understand what actually targets a better producing goat that you might want to invest in, the type of breed, the type of breeding that you would need to do, how you would need to feed the goat. I mean, there's a variety of things. So I think this is a great example of it's starting to give you insights of your business idea, not only on the problem you're trying to solve, but also on the challenges that you're going to need to consider. So for example, the investment that you would have to incorporate in the housing of what's going to be your producing animal, how much you would have to feed them and what you would need to feed them in order to produce the adequate type of milk. Even throughout the whole supply chain, once you do extract the milk, how do you get it to the community? So you can see how you start developing almost a supply chain that you might want to test and prototype and validate. So let's go on to, we have another exercise, but thank you so much, Dan's business idea. Dan Ghost, that was Dan, yeah, Dan Dairies. I like the alliteration. Yes, absolutely. Another person's telling me milk preservation. How do you maintain it cold throughout the supply chain so it doesn't spoil? So great participation, you all, from the challenges or the things that we would need to consider. So let's move on to the next section in the interest of time. We're going to give you another tool, which is called the 5 whys. So the empathy mapping exercise gives you the firsthand experience on how you can provide valuable insights of the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of your users, right? So it's an iterative process. So another tool that can give you more information about how to test and validate. So for that validation phase of the design thinking process, what the real root cause is called the 5 whys. So the 5 whys is a very simple questioning technique. Basically, you identify an underlying cause problem and you keep on asking why until you eventually reach the root cause. So Gabriela, please take us through an example. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you move to the next slide, Rosa, please? So going back to the clean water example, let's start asking, why is this happening? So maybe our first thought is that the local water treatment facility is not functioning properly. If I don't have clean water in my house, it might be related to the treatment facility. So why is the local water treatment facility not functioning properly? Maybe the facility is outdated and needs some repairs. So that's the second why. Then why does it need repairs, or why is it outdated? Maybe there's been a lack of maintenance and investment in new infrastructure and technology. So why there's been a lack of maintenance and investment? Maybe because there is lack of funds for technology-driven solutions from public and private sector. And why is that? Maybe because there is limited government resources and cost-effective solutions. So you can see that from a broad problem as lack of clean water, we can get a more concrete problem related to limited government resources and cost-effective solutions. So the idea is to get to the root cause problem statement, that in this case is that there is a lack of maintenance and investment in water infrastructure has led to malfunctioning water treatment facilities, which results in the lack of clean water for communities. So when you have a more specific problem, thinking about a solution might be easier. And we can do that also with the goat milk example or the beach cleaning example. Just asking 5 whys will give you a more specific problem.
I think maybe it would be good. I'm interested to hear more about the beach cleaning example. So maybe we can go back to Queenstar and dig a little bit more. So Queenstar, if you want to put in the chat, what is the problem that you're trying to solve specifically? And we can go from there. Oh, thank you, Rosa. Yeah, if you want to unmute, that would even be great.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Okay, so thank you for this opportunity. So with the coastal involvement to beach cleaning, I think the problem that I seek to solve is that usually we organize a lot of beach cleanups during international holidays, but then after the holidays, you go back and you realize that the beach is still dirty. So it means that most of the community dwellers are really not sensitized enough to address this problem. They may not really be well informed about the reason why they should keep the beach clean. So it means that if we involve the community, we can have them as watchdogs. They can be, watching over the place and making sure that the place is even clean without having, people from far away to come and always organize beach cleanups and then going back and seeing that the place is actually dirty all over again. So that's actually the problem that I ought to solve, with involving the community dwellers in those coastal areas.
So I think this is a great example. Thank you so much, Queenstar, of how we can dig into the problem deeper. And sometimes we also tend to try and think of the solution first. So we know that we need some sort of community-based system to, like you said, be a watchdog over the beach cleaning, right? I'm thinking, and there's something that resonated that you said, and it says all these people from far away are coming and making the beach dirty in the first place, right? So maybe we also have the root cause deeper into that. Like, why are tourists coming potentially, or visitors coming to the beach and not following, for example, regulations? Do we have signage at the beach? Are they aware of the environmental impact that this could cause? Do they understand the impact that it has on the communities? Why should the communities be responsible for cleaning and not the people that are enjoying the gracious environment that your community has, right? So maybe, Gabriela, we can go through, instead of the lack of clean water, we can go through the exercise of well, we would say the beach is not, well, the root cause would be, I'm thinking whether the root cause would be the beach is not clean, or whether it would be visitors are polluting the beach. What do you guys think? Which one would be the problem cause? The beach is not clean, or there's external forces polluting the beach? Any responses? Okay, let's say external or even internal forces not taking care of the beach. So then why is this happening? So we know why is this happening, what is causing this. So we can say there is no clear rules or regulations on how the beach should be maintained. There's no enforcement of these rules or regulations. There is no adequate, I see dustbins availability. There is no signage on the beach. Why is this? There's no funding for maintenance of the beach. There's no funding or resources for an oversight of the beach. I see that we're concerned about external forces polluting the beach. National sanitation rules enforcement, absolutely. Lack of knowledge from the people visiting the beach. Also lack of campaigning from environment or tourism ministries or government agencies that are not informing the tourist, both internal and external, of how they should treat the environment and the implications that it has on communities. What type of solutions are there that can, the lack of awareness of solutions that could potentially treat the issue of polluting of the beach. So it's just, we wanted to kind of give you a brief idea of how to really get to the problem definition and frame your problem adequately, and reiterate that it's an iterative process. It's a process that also requires a lot of information and a lot of data. And this is kind of the whole purpose of this session, right? Is to better understand how to inform your business decision, how to frame the problem around your business decision in a fact-based way. And in order to do that, you will always need the incorporation of data, and preferably open data, which is of course what we try and promote. So just please remember, the example of the lack of clean water, because that's what you're going to use in the next sessions. But I would really like to thank you all for the participation in this section. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them to me through the chat, and we can continue to ask those. And then I'm going to pass it over to Rosa, who I know is going to pass it on to Dunstan, but over to you, Rosa and Dunstan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very interesting session, Michelle and Gabriela. Hopefully we learned new things and precisely 2 tools you can apply. And now we're moving into supporting your business solution. And I want to encourage you to think about the water example, but also about the ideas that we have just heard. Maybe you want to use one of those. It's up to you, really. So Dunstan, over to you. Please take us through some of the data aspects of this.
All right, thank you, Rosa, and Michelle and Gabriel. I think you guys have laid a very good foundation in number 1, just describing how data can be used. But most importantly, I think being able to, first of all, identifying the problem, clearly defining that problem, and thinking of the solutions. That's always very important before we jump into just using data. So yeah, given that you have identified the problem, you've kind of tried to get to the root cause of the problem and starting thinking of the solution. As Rosa mentioned in the very earlier slides, right, there are kind of 2 main ways that you can use data. So number 1 is we can use data as for research to understand the problem more, to try to strategize using the data. So I'll use the children malnutrition as a running example. So if we think of this problem, how to solve the problem of children nutrition, so you can use data to just try to understand the problem, right? So asking questions such as, across the country, for example, where is this problem most serious, right? Across time, for example, maybe across the year, when is it most serious? Is it at the beginning of the year? Maybe which month? So asking questions like that, you can go to the Ministry of Health or Statistics to find some open data to try to understand this problem more and also help you to come up with a solution. And of course, when you think of the solution, you can also use data as a raw material for that solution. So when you think of the main steps, so number one, of course, as I said, you need to have that problem very well defined. And then number two, you need to have that solution. So here, the example I was giving on the slide is, let's say, poor utilization of digital financial services, but I think I'll use this example of malnutrition instead, but you can replace this with any example really. So you have the problem, you have defined the solution, and then I think you have kind of, you need to define very clearly how what data you need and how you are going to use that data in your solution. So as I said, you can use that as a raw material, but you can also use data just to help you understand the problem better, to help you to strategize on how to deploy your solution. Once you've done that, then this step is to now collect and gather data. So we're going to focus a little bit more on how to do that in this session. How do you go about collecting the data and gathering the data? And of course, finally, you can start using the data. So these are the summary of the important steps you are going to follow once you identify the problem and the solution and how to go about using data. Rosa, we can go to the next slide. So as we are talking about data, this slide is just to give you an idea of what are some of the data that are available, what are some of those data that we can use. So we can think of this in terms of categories, right? We can have data on people, for example. So again, taking this problem of malnutrition in children, right? So we have the problem about children who are people. So we can get information about the children, for example, from the Ministry of Health, from the National Statistical Office. So this is one category of data about people. But we also need data about the built environment or the environment. So given again this problem of malnutrition, as you try to solve it, right? So you may think about what type of food is available, right? So as you try to understand the problem across the country, you may see that maybe it's very serious in places where people are not growing enough food, for example. So you may want to try to understand the land cover. You may want to try to understand what's going on in the environment around those areas where this problem is serious. So you may want to use this type of data. Then again, another type of data category is just the business data about businesses and processes. So for example, you may want to go to the hospitals to see like what's going on there. You may want to try to see like where people are buying food. So for example, maybe the company that sells food, maybe it's not available in some areas. So again, you can get data on this. And finally, some data is more about infrastructure, right? And things, for example. So if there's this big issue of children malnutrition, as you try to provide a solution, so you may want to understand, okay, maybe we want to recommend people to go to a hospital or to go to some type of facility where they may help them with some type of social services. So understanding what infrastructure is available requires data as well for you to be able to say, okay, in this specific area, we have these many hospitals, or we have these many social welfare services. So this is like data about infrastructure. Rosa, we can move to the next slide. So now, again, just moving on, we have an understanding of some of the data that we may have access to. We have an understanding of how to define this problem and how we want to use the data. So here I'm just, we're just drilling down more specifically on how do you find that data, right? So you have an idea on what type of data you need maybe, but how do you go about finding the data? So this is an example strategy. It may not work in all scenarios, but I think these steps are very good to follow, right? So number one, again, it's very important that you understand very well the data that you need, and of course, how we are going to use it. Number two is you are going to sit down and try to find the potential sources of data. So again, this is going to depend on a lot of things. So for this malnutrition problem, as an example, so let's say you want to understand how bad this problem is across the different parts of the country. So you may go to the Minister of Health to see like how many kids suffer from this problem every year. You may go to the National Statistics Office, they collect data on malnutrition. But for some things, you may want maybe even data that is not open. So you may have to think about other maybe non-open data. But in this step, you're brainstorming to identify the potential sources of data. Once you have that, then you have to think of how do you access that data. So if data is open, as the others have said, mostly you can access that data without need for maybe an MOU, without need for paying, without need for a special license. But of course, what happens in reality is that your business may need data that is not open. So you may have to sit down with the data provider to come up with an MOU or something like that. And of course, in order to use data, the data has to be stored in somewhere, right? So you need computers, you may need a server, you need to set up an environment to be able to process and use the data once you have it. So this, you may need a software to analyze the data. So all this is about being able to prepare an environment for you to access the data, store the data securely, analyze the data, and use it in your solution. So that's what these steps are about. And then, of course, finally, you physically access the data. So this seems like it's an obvious step, but actually, even with all the agreement, the actual process of accessing the data can also take time. So this is a summary of some of the main steps. We can move on to the next slide, Rosa. This is an example that I put forward. It's not a very typical example that we have here, but you can replace this with any problem you have in mind. But this problem, I'm focusing on the problem of, as we're talking about digital solutions, as we're talking about data-driven solutions, one of the problems I've seen, this is one of the problems that I'm very passionate about and dealing with right now, is when we have a digital solution such as a website or an app. That app may be a healthy app. What we see in most cases in low-income regions in Africa, so I'm from Malawi, right? Most of these solutions come with English as the only way to interact with the website, maybe as the only way to interact with the app. If it has a local language, maybe it's the majority local language. So the problem here is how can we provide this type of technology, but in local language or in vernacular language? How can we enable people, let's say, to use their voice in their local language to interact with a smartphone? So the main way to solve this problem, of course, is to collect a lot of data. So most of the data we need here is text data. But the text data has to be in the local language. So whatever local language you have in your country, it may be a very small language, but we need a lot of text data. So we can go to sources such as Wikipedia, where the data is open. We can find maybe newspaper articles, which are mostly their license is also open. So those are some of the data sources that we can find. And when we're talking about of course, we are focusing on open data here, but in this case, we are also, it's not just about open data, but also open tools, right? Open models. So for example, now we have ChatGPT, which you can use to try to provide like translation for some small languages. But in order to do that, you may want to, again, to collect extra data and then fine tune or customize the ChatGPT or other large language models. So this is just to give an example of how you can use open data as well as open software and open models to solve a problem. So we can move to the next slide, Rosa. I'm not going to dwell much on this, but again, I've talked about this, the potential sources of data. I've talked about some of the main categories of data that you may use. in this slide, it's just to give you some of the resources. So this presents like some of the resources you can, for example, for population data, you can just go click some of these websites to access some of this data. So feel free to take a screenshot. You may want to use these potential sources for the exercise that we'll have at the end of this section. We can move to the next slide. Yeah, so finally, I think this is the exciting part. I think just having me talking about this may not be very exciting, but I still hope you enjoyed it. So for this, it's an exercise. So what will happen is you're going to go into groups, breakout sessions. The task here is recall that we have, so Michelle and Gabrielle really did a good job to discuss some of the problems. So we've talked about the clean water problem, right? We've seen the, I'm not checking the chat now, but we've seen the children malnutrition problem. We've seen the kind of pollution or garbage in the beach program. So we have some of these problems, right? So given any one of these problems or any other problem that you have in mind, the idea here is how can you use data to provide a solution for that problem? Again, as I said, there are many ways to use data. Number one is also just using data to understand that problem more, right? So number one, how do you use data to understand the problem more? How do you use data to provide a solution for that problem? So specifically, as you can see here, what I want you to do is to think about what I just said, but in terms of the outputs or the solutions that I want you to have is number one, once you have thought about that problem, you should be able to describe, come and describe how your solution can leverage data to implement the, how your solution can leverage data to solve the problem. And also just give us a brief list of some of the data that you may use to solve that problem, as well as some of the data sources. So if you think of, let's say for the nutrition problem, if you say, okay, we just need data on how many people, how many children have this problem. So think of like, what would be the potential sources of that data? So I think I can stop here, Rosa. So if they have any questions about this exercise, maybe they can put in the chat and I can answer the questions.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Dunstan. Without further ado, we will go ahead and start the breakout rooms now. You will have about 7 minutes to discuss. So about 5-6 minutes into the discussion, you will see the reminder that you will be returning soon to our webinar here. So please don't be shy. We will also be joining some of the rooms to say hi and to help facilitate the discussion. But it's basically for you guys to meet and to also discuss the assignment that is here. You may want to maybe take a screenshot or take a photo of this slide to remember the questions. So let me go ahead and open all rooms now so you can join a group where you were assigned. You should have the groups, rooms now available. Please go ahead and join one of the rooms. And I will ask our experts to do the same. Join one of the rooms and help facilitate. Don't be shy. This is mainly just for you guys to meet and discuss your idea and questions that Dunstan has left us with.
Can we also ask our Ghana team to just assign participants maybe that haven't been assigned?
They all have been assigned because I am the one controlling it.
Okay, good.
But they need to click on join the group. So they are not automatically added to the group. They've assigned, but not added. So
okay, so if Gabriella, Dunstan, and Ashwin, if we can join, I'll join group 4, and then Gabriella group 3, Ashwin group 2, and then Dunstan group 1.
that would be great. Yep.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye. people use. Oh, wow.
Wow, that was short.
That was short. Okay,
Yeah, I think
shots.
that was too
Very
short. I
short.
don't know, but I sorry, Florence. I kept talking, but
Yeah, I was also in the middle of a sentence.
Sorry, guys. I think that there was supposed to be a warning, but it closed us abruptly. Any
But
last?
Rosa, I think it's a good thing because the groups were getting on the smaller side, but I kind of jumped in from group, from group to group, and there is really good similar challenges that they were talking about. So, the disaggregation of data, the lack of data of social issues specific to people, the enormous amount of data at the geospatial or geolocated level, but not necessarily from, the behavioral science aspect of data about the people and for the people. We also saw that lack, like I said, the lack of disaggregation or the lack of access to data, to big data that can be reusable. So essentially the lack of open data access. But we see like these challenges throughout each of the groups, which was interesting. So maybe we can have a little bit more of a discussion through the chat here, or if someone wants to unmute and talk about other challenges, or maybe what the other groups thought about, but that's just my reflection. Sorry to jump in.
No, thank you so much. I apologize that there was supposed to be a 1-minute warning, but we do need to move forward. Sorry, Emmanuel is saying way too short. I agree. We only have 20 minutes and we have a very exciting part of the presentation still. So let's keep talking through the chat while I'm inviting Ashwin to please take us through some of the first steps in planning a data-driven business. So please, Ashwin, go ahead.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks a lot. And I think Michelle, Gabriella, Dunstan, Rosa, I think you guys did a phenomenal job in, I think, setting the floor up. So I think just going on to the next slide, if you can, Rosa. So I think one of the things which I really noticed was that I think all of you are coming up with very innovative ideas, right? From, I think, the beach cleaning to pure water, I think then generally to, I think, understanding a bit more around, I think, the saloon play as well, the saloon idea. I think all of them are extremely, extremely good. And I think they're extremely, I think, like, interesting because you guys seem to think there's a big enough challenge around it, right? I think when Florence, you mentioned the saloon idea, or when the other people mentioned all the different ideas, including the dairy business, you guys are starting to see that there's a lot of things, right? And traditionally in business, and that's what we often look at as even investors, is how much of the problem is actually being faced, right? So if you look at today, I think the beach cleanliness problem today in Greater Accra, as well as I think a little bit of Pram and a little bit of I think mid around, I think going all the way to Kokrobite or even Winneba for that matter, beach is dirty, right? And that's a pretty large chunk of our our beach side or our countryside, right? Similarly, I think there's a lot of challenges around, I think, generally about figuring out what is required for the beaches also to become extremely clean as well. So when you start looking at, like, I think the overall, like, how big is the problem, you'll see that data guides actually how big the problem is, right? And once you start moving from the problem statement, you start also realizing is there only Ghana where the water is actually dirty? Is other parts of the world, I'm currently sitting in India and I can tell you the beach water here is actually pretty dirty as well. So you start to understand what is actually a market or what exactly is a potential. Like, if the problem exists in Ghana, does the problem exist in other neighbor African countries? Does it exist in Latin America? Does it exist in Asia? So I think there's a lot of pushing forward in understanding of how data really affects your problem statement and really affects your market sizing. Now, once you have your problem statement and once you have your market sizing, what you'll realize is that you will take both of them. You will compile data around problem, you'll compile data around market sizing, and then you'll get another big data set. And I think Dunstan did a really good job in telling you where you can find data once you start doing a lot of things around, like, figuring out if this problem exists in other African countries as well. I think that becomes really valuable. One of the key points about, I think, the data in between the problem statement and the solution statement is the fact that Sometimes this data can be user generated. So one of the things which I think like Dunstan and everyone else spoke about, especially Michelle also spoke about in the design thinking session, is a lot of questioning your users and a lot of questioning, I think, who is going to be participating in this activity. So becomes some sort of a survey, which essentially translates to more data. So essentially what is happening today is the fact that in the business world today, and I think Rosa said it really, really importantly, data is becoming the currency of even the business world. Is there enough data today to support your problem, right? Once you've seen the problem, are you able to speak to enough people who are actually facing that problem? And then once you're able to get that amount of data, what you're looking at is you'll be looking at really figuring out what the solution statement is or how you're going to basically solve the problem, right? Because see, a problem which is being faced in Ghana is good. A problem which is being faced in Nigeria is also good, but they might not have the same solution, or they might not have necessarily the same lens of the problem as well. So for you to actually come in and then create your solution statement is actually extremely critical. Once you're able to create with that 2 data sets, you've got your solution statement, you'll also be able to create your value proposition. Then you'll also be able to create your financial projections, which make it a real business. And actually, you want to see if this is a good business to run. And fortunately and unfortunately, I think cleaning beaches is a fantastic mission, but it's not really yet a very interesting business to do, right? But you'll start to understand financial projections, market sizing, problem statement, which finally then leads to something which also for us business people is really important, is how big is this business, or what the valuation of this business is going to be pre or post funding rounds, etc. Next slide, please, Rosa. So one of the things which I really want to make sure that you guys understand, I think, towards this session or as little time as we have, is how do you actually craft a problem statement with data, right? So one of the things which we often tell people is, like, I don't know the last time you guys ever called a bank hotline, or you called, let's say, an average, let's say, telecom, an Airtel or an MTN customer service, right? And what the biggest problem right now over there, which is being faced, and you see the power of this, the putting data into your problem statement, is that there has been a blanket statement made that the average customer on hold time for delivery companies, right, exceeds 5 minutes, right? So if you can imagine this, for a bank and a telco, we don't know the data yet around it, but for delivery companies, we know that it takes about 5 minutes during its busy and slow seasons, right? Now, if you want to start thinking about the problem statement specifically around like delivery companies and making sure that you're able to understand that particularly, is that imagine you're calling food on Bolt or on Uber or Glovo, for example, right? And you're trying to understand, okay, where's my food at? And they're telling you that you're going to wait for more than 5 minutes, right? And that's necessarily like a big problem to have. Now, if you say that there is 1,000 people calling, and each one of them is waiting for 5 minutes more, right? That's 5,000 minutes wasted. Now, if you start putting that as 10,000 people, that's 10,000 minutes wasted. So you can see that what I did was I took that 5 minutes, I started combining it with the market, right? So I said, first, there's only 1,000 people. Then there's, let's say, 2,000 people. Then there's 10,000 people, right? The 2,000 people basically take 10,000 minutes. The 1,000 people take 5,000 minutes. The 10,000 people take 50,000 minutes. Sorry, I said 10,000 earlier. That was my bad. But essentially, you start understanding what the market is. And as the market or as the number of people grow, you can see that the problem is becoming bigger and bigger, right? The second problem statement, which I want to bring like a very interesting thing about, is that a lot of companies right now in the US are talking about employee turnover rate is up by 60%, with most of them leaving due to a lack of growth opportunities, right? So if you look at both of these problem statements today, they're both beautifully quantified with data in them, right? And that's what you essentially want today with any sort of problem statement explanation. Is what you really want to explain is that there is data in the problem. And if I basically combine that problem with the number of people, right, it basically shows you how big the problem is, right? And that alone gets a lot of business operators very excited, right? Like the beach example or the saloon example or the dairy example. If you start looking at it from a large amount of cows or humans, you start seeing that there's a lot of people facing that problem. Okay, so remember this, the more data you can communicate about a problem statement, the bigger the problem is, and the bigger your solution becomes. And thereby, the potential of your business also becomes extremely higher. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, yeah. Now, basically crafting a generic solution statement, which is something which is like super critical, I think, for us, is that when you're creating a business, right, what you really want to do is you want to really communicate how you're solving the problem, right? So for the first problem statement which I had listed was that people are waiting by, let's say, 5 minutes, right? If you basically say that our service guarantees that we reduce the service for basically on hold time for delivery companies by 60%, right? Which basically means that you're telling everyone that, listen, if you are going to take our service, we guarantee to you that our on hold time for your company is going to be less than 2 minutes. That's the service you're selling. The service which you're selling is that there's a 5-minute gap, you're selling a 2-minute gap, right? So there alone, people see that potential and they're like, oh my God, this is a very interesting business. How do you do it, right? And as soon as you're able to say that in the right way, and as soon as you're able to generate the right amount of attention, people are like, oh my God, this is actually a super serious business to actually really look at, right? So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing, basically what you're seeing right now is that if you have a digital business and you're saying, okay, there's employee turnover, your employees are leaving you, 60% of them are leaving you. And now you come in and basically say that our product can reduce your employee turnover by half, right? And why the solution statement is basically half. Why I'm saying half over here is the fact that not all companies have 60%. It's a wide range. Some companies might have 10%, some companies might have 80%, some companies might have 40%. But what you're saying is that if you have a 40% turnover or an 80% or a 10% turnover, my product will make sure that we're reducing it by half, which means it can either become 5, it can either become 20, or it can either become 40, right? So essentially that way as well, you're buying yourself some time, and you're also buying yourself basically the ability to sell someone something using data. So essentially, these are like the first principles we use technically in problem statements and solution statements. We try to put data in as quickly as possible, because currently today, everyone knows a little bit around what the data looks like or what the data should look like. So I think overall, if you're able to bring in some sort of data around the problem and solution statement, I think you guys will be doing a fantastic job. Next slide. And I'm going to basically wrap up with this one, and I think then pass it over back to Rosa. So around data-driven businesses, like for me, which is like 3 or 2 simple rules I basically follow, is having a strong problem statement where people understand the problem directly is advantageous, right? So in the previous 2 problems, you noticed I used very generic words, which is that there is on-hold time for delivery companies. Is a very simple problem. Everyone knows it, everyone's gone through it, and the lesser language you use, the better it is. I often think data doesn't need to be in the solution. If it is, you're winning a potential customer. That's what we have noticed. If you look at like brands, for example, right? A lot of brands offer discounts in their taglines, or they offer discount directly in the solution, right? Like they're like, we're a 99-cent store, or buy anything here for less than 50 CDs. Right? Because that's what they're providing. That's the solution. They know that the economy is going out of control. They know different things are happening. So be able to provide data in your solution really wins your customer. And finally, I think data is extremely important when you're deciding the pricing of the service or the solution. I think if you're able to do that very heavily, you'll be able to price pretty effectively as well. So I'm going to wrap up. I know we're running short of time. Rose, back to you so that we can, I think, run to Q&A and some more wrap-ups as well.
Thanks so much, Ashwin. This was great, and appreciate the sticking to the time limit. At this point, we should move to Q&A. Unfortunately, we don't have a time exactly to do another breakout session, but hopefully we can have a lively discussion. Just as key takeaways, I wanted to point out a few things that you learned today in line with our objectives for the session. One is that open data is data that anyone can access, use, and share, but please remember that it needs to be machine readable and legally open, which means it has to have a license for you to reuse it, including for commercial purposes. So that's open data that you can use for your business. Businesses can use data in two ways: as a source of information, as analytics for market analysis and things like that to set up a business, but also as raw material to reuse it as a business solution, as an innovation. For instance, as we looked at some of the examples, data can actually be the source of your product, business products. Third, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. So please remember the two tools that we introduced today in design thinking to process and identify the problem. And then concise and clear definition of what your idea is, of what data is needed and how it will be used to solve your business problem is necessary to successful data-driven solution. And finally, problem well-defined can provide a solution and market size directly. So with these, I want to ask, first thank all the presenters and all the participants for active participation, and go to some questions. At the same time, at this time, we want to run evaluation. So please, I'm asking our organizers to please launch the evaluation for us, so you can answer some questions while also ask some questions in the chat, and you can unmute yourself at this time. So don't be shy. Either questions or any other reflections, ideas, or feedback. You are free to do so at this time. So I have let all the participants to unmute themselves and speak if they like. So please, if you have any questions to any of our experts, I will ask our experts to also please go on camera right now so that participants can see you. We will stop sharing the screen.
Ashwin, I have a question for you. You've worked with many startups, and then I'm sure having been at Mist and still managing some other businesses, what would you say are the greatest challenges that startups face in terms of the ability to have access to data, use data in their business for data-driven decisions? Is it easy? Do you think startups in Africa really use data to make decisions?
Well, that's a very controversial question, especially in a forum where we're talking about data. I'll be honest, I don't think startups use enough external data in Africa. I think a lot of external data is unreliable and not dependable. But what we've realized is that startups are today in the ability where they can generate data, right? Like currently, when I work with maybe a complete farmer or my own company, Spark, for example, I have thousands of farmers or thousands of, let's say, my own financial institution customers who I can reach out to generate data. And that's what I do. So we often reach out to our own customers or try to create like a loyalty/waitlist group, Florence. And using waitlist group or using, I think, our customers, we're able to generate data for us, which helps our business. So one of the things which I often truly believe in, and I say this to MEST startups or any of the other startups I work in or I support, is that talking to your customers to generate data is probably the single most important thing you can do. Every single day, reaching out to them, talking to them, qualitative, doesn't matter. Like a quick 2-question survey, if you're confused about anything, to 5 of your trustworthy customers give you enough data to run your business successfully. So I think that'll be my answer for us.
Okay.
Thanks so much for the question, Florence, and for the answer, Ashwin. We have, I think, time for one more if anybody wants to unmute themselves and speak at this time. Doesn't have to be a question, can be reflection, can be any feedback, anything at all.
There is a question in the chat. Where can I get open data?
Oh, excellent question.
There's another hand up.
Thanks so much, Florence. Dunstan, do you want to take that one? Oh, you're muted. Okay.
Yeah, can she repeat that? What's the question?
Where can you get open data?
Yeah, I mean, it's a case by case, but I think in one of the slides I showed potential sources for open data, right? So it's going to be a case by case. So if you are looking for statistical, let's say data on malnutrition as an example, as one of the programs, then you can get that from the Ministry of Health. I think most of the data they publish there is going to be open from the statistical office. Most of the data there is going to be open. If you are looking for population data, as I'm showing here, you can get a lot of open data from WorldPop. If you are looking for data on buildings, for example, Google has published. So it's really, there's a lot of open data out there. It's going to be a case by case on depending on the specific data that you need, but there's a lot of open data.
Thanks so much, Dunstan. I also pulled up the slide, so you can take a screenshot or picture, and it will be available for those who are watching the recording. I want to go over to Winston now and remind everyone to please click a poll section to respond to some questions. So Winston, over to you. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Right, hello, and I hope all of you can hear me clearly. Great. So my question is in regards to like just the execution of how you go about like gathering data. And that's my question is more of like, what digital tools have you used and have found helpful in gathering data to help you understand the problem? And also, what digital tools have you used and have found helpful in gathering data to find a solution? So what tools have you used, digital tools, have you used that helps it easy to spot what a problem really is? And what tools have you used, digital tools have you used to help you spot what a solution really is? Does that make sense?
Is this question for someone particularly on our panel?
This is
I
not
think, Rose, I
directed
can
to
answer
someone.
one
I
of the
just want to get.
questions.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, Dunstan, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I think I'm just answering on some of the, he's asking, I think, about digital tools for gathering data, if I get it correctly. So again, I think it's really going to depend a lot on the type of data that you're looking for, right? So in some cases, all you need to do is access the website where the data is and just download it, right? So if you're just looking for a one-time access for the data, so you can just do that. But there are other cases where your solution really is ingesting or consuming that data all the time, let's say every day. So you are using an API to connect to some type of data source and you are using that data every day. So with that, I think you need to use, let's say, programming platforms such as Python or R or other platforms where you can connect to APIs. So for example, like if you're accessing Facebook data or Twitter data, then you need such type of platforms, let's say using Python, to be able to connect to these data APIs and consume that data every day. In other cases, you may need to use what we call web scraping tools. So if you want to go to, let's say, Amazon website and extract all the prices for African goods, for example, or something like that, then you need, like, again, Python or other programming tools to be able to write a program which can go and extract that data automatically. So if, ultimately, at the end, it's really going to depend a lot on the specific data that you are looking So that's what will determine the tool that you need. I hope that answers that question.
Also, just wanted to
Yes,
point.
it did.
Sorry, Winston, go ahead.
Oh no, he was asking if that answered, and yes, that was quite helpful. Thank you, Mr.
And if
Dunstan.
there was a second part
Dr.
to your
Dunstan,
question,
sorry.
do you mind repeating that? Sorry, I think there was a part of
So
your
it was
question.
more of right. It was the tools that would help you easily spot a solution to a problem. Let's say you've gathered the data. There's some tools that are designed in a way to just quickly help you see, oh, this is what a solution looks like. Yeah, so that's what I was asking about.
I know Ashwin might be checking out quickly, but is that something, Ashwin, you have experience with? I think it's from business side, no?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can definitely answer. Winston, do you mind just like repeating the question just one last time? Sorry, my
Right.
internet's extremely flaky.
It's apologies if the question was unclear. Are there tools that help you like just easily find solutions to a problem? Let's say you've gathered the data.
Yeah.
There's this tool that you use. It could be Power BI. I actually don't know. But some digital tool that easily helps you recognize, oh, this is what a potential solution looks like. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think the most easiest answer right now is ChatGPT. Like, I'll be honest, like
Right.
I know tons of entrepreneurs, and I'll be honest, including myself, won't be ashamed to say it, have used it for sort of like some sort of insight. But I do agree that Power BI is actually a good tool. There are, I think, specifically like, and maybe I could just share with Florence, but there's like this one or two tools which I know that people are now using a lot in US universities. I need to find out what the names are, but there are quite a few tools. But I would highly recommend ChatGPT. Like it's pretty good.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for your
Brother, do you
question
have
as well.
space for one more question from Professor Peter Pan?
Yes, we do. I just wanted to mention to people that we also are putting some useful resources on the chat. So please check that out for some of the answers and some of the additional links. Yes, Professor Peter, with you, we will wrap up.
Yeah, thank you, Florence, and thank you to all of those on the panel. Mine is sort of an observation, and I'm just kind of curious to hear your reaction to it. As much as we see sort of this open data movement, move forward in the last, 5-10 years, one of the other things that we have seen, and I've seen this a lot of the time with a lot of the graduate students that I mentor who are trying to get data that we know is out there, usually in government circles for their research projects or for their social impact projects. And one of the challenges that they faced is sort of the approval process for getting that data. And the fact that a lot of ministries are now finding that this data that they're collecting as new forms of revenue generation for their ministry and such. Even if that data was gathered through taxpayer money or through partners, external partners such as the World Bank. And I'm wondering if you can kind of, reflect on that a little bit. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. And what are some strategies folks can do or when they are trying to get data that they know that is there, but, a certain stakeholder has access to them? I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Maybe I'll start and ask Michelle to complement. It is indeed a problem that government thinks they can generate money from selling the data, right? That's what you are pointing out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And see it as a way of sort of helping the ministry on the financial end. Yeah.
Well, in fact, in some of the ministries and how their revenues are structured, oftentimes the money doesn't come to the department that actually sells that data, and they don't even, and the sales are so so small, they don't recognize that if they actually open it for free, the benefits to the economy of the country will be much greater than the profit, the revenue they're making. And like I said, oftentimes it doesn't even go to the department. It actually goes to the revenue authority and gets lost and not repurposed for the department that actually uses its own resources to produce that data. So that's one argument that we at the World Bank Group have been using as well. It's, as far as strategies, it is really tough to make that data available if it's not already. I would say that, you know, using partnerships through the organizations that already have established partnerships with the government or those stakeholders who have that data could be one. And maybe Michelle, over to you to also add.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think, though, I know that the open data movement has had its struggles in the last few years, but we can't also discount the amount of countries that now have legislation and a mandate to disclose open data. Now, how that's operationalized and how that's functional in practice is a different story, right? But just to give you an example, we work in countries in Asia, in Africa, and Latin America, and every single country that we work in has an open data mandate, right? Open government mandate. So there is the understanding that data has to be publicly available. Publicly available information is not necessarily open data. So what we're struggling in is getting that licensing and getting it to be the technical requirements that open data should be. But I agree with Rosa that I think the data collaboratives that we're talking about and including other stakeholders is essential. The government doesn't collect all the data, and you're not going to find all the data that are likely you will need for either research or business. And it gets a little bit more challenging on making the value case for maybe the private sector on what the value of giving up their data without any financial, without selling it, essentially what the business case would be for that. But fortunately, we've seen that they are moving in the right direction, seeing, like Rosa said, that the contributions to the digital economy are huge, and that there is a potential for catalyzing innovation, not only of livelihoods, but also on making sure that their businesses are operating in the best possible way, using data to operationalize their own businesses. So it is a challenge, but I think we are in the right direction. I think now what we need is data stewardship across these institutions where people understand the concept of data, they understand what good data would mean, and what open data actually means. But over to you, Rosa.
Thanks so much. I think we're properly out of time. I'm just asking that people please answer a few questions in the poll section. I do see the raised, no, I think we're, Ayo. Ayo has a question. Is that, Ayo, did you want to?
Thank you. So the name is Yao. I just want to make a comment, yes, in regard the restriction on government data. I think in Ghana, we've started making some inroad that last year or somewhere this year, the government passed Right to Information Bill, of which there's a commission. So a private entity can walk into a government agency asking for information, and when that information is denied, they can report to the commission, and the commission can fine the government agency involved. It may not be right say that because government, they are all government institutions, but as part of the process of getting there. So just want to draw attention that in Ghana, we are kind of getting there. Aside the restriction, there are bills that have been put in place to make access to government data accessible and easily as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellent comment. Any other last minute comments? I don't see any more hands. And please check out our chat for more resources. Please take a poll in the poll function. Yeah, and thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. It's been a great session. I hope you learned some things that you will apply. And yeah, have a wonderful rest of the conference. I think we are ready to close now.
Okay, thank you, Rosa and Tim, and thank you everyone who joined. I can see that the interest was sustained throughout. Everybody stayed online. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Florence. A special thanks to you for flawless organization. This was great.
Thank you, Florence and team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Florence.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.